Live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, you're me anymore. And live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, you're Live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, you're me
Hello, everybody. So today is Sunday, March 3rd, and we are bringing you Block Digest number 161 at block height 565,520. What is going on, guys?
Oh, well, just been working it out, man. Busy morning. But yeah, it sounds like is it you sure it's the March 3rd Sunday? Like, it's not like an extended Saturday for you. Did you get much sleep last night?
Shut up.
All right. Yeah, but it's been busy. So yeah, we've all been pretty busy. How have you been doing this morning, Janine?
Oh, I mean, just discovering that someone at Coinbase, leaked the fact that their customer data was being sold, but no big deal.
Oh yeah, that was pretty interesting. It's been fun watching them sort of try and tiptoe their way through this ongoing discussion about this hashtag movement, delete Coinbase, and yeah, that's been the biggest misstep so far. It'll be interesting to dig into that here in a little bit for sure. But yeah, it's been pretty hectic with all that. So what's going on, Shinobi? What are we breaking down?
Well, let's start off with something positive first instead. So, dun dun dun! Blockstream, our evil corporate overlords, have made a pretty fucking ballin' announcement. So Sea Lightning has dropped version 0.7 with a bunch of big pushes. So first off, it is including a new plugin feature, which I will get more into in a minute. It is implemented a route boost feature, which pretty much allows a node not publicly advertising their channels to include the relevant information in a payment invoice to allow them to actually receive a payment for that last hop while maintaining privacy of the channel so it's not publicly broadcast. It improved funds management logic to have better control over which coins are used to fund channels and withdraw from nodes to kind of deal with some issues regarding unconfirmed transactions. Option data loss protect is now enabled by default, which is a feature that pretty much is set up to allow your Lightning node, if you've had to recover from an old state or you for some reason have fallen behind the latest channel state, to be able to discern that and contact the other side of the channel so that they can close the channel out. And most importantly, prevent your node from accidentally broadcasting old channel states, which can result in you losing all of your money. They have set up reproducible builds, so you can kind of emulate the Gideon setup used for Bitcoin core being compiled and ensure that the code, the binaries produced from the code actually match the ones that are distributed by Blockstream. So nice security improvement. As well documentation for all of the new stuff and a bunch of performance increases. So to get into the plugins feature, this is something I am really fucking psyched for. And at this point, like I'm not really that familiar with the overall architecture of LND or Eclair from Async, but the little I do know, to my understanding, is everything is kind of wrapped up in the actual binary in terms of features, and you pretty much in order to play with things, have to actually tinker around with the code and recompile and so on. But Blockstream has introduced this plugin feature for C Lightning to simplify the ability of altering the logic for different node operations, building in new features, and so on. And it's pretty much set up to allow you to create your own plugin that would actually be able to have its options registered as a Lightning D option, so that it pretty much folds all of the plugins into proper C Lightning or Lightning D command line options, and you don't have to go tinkering with things in a plugin independent of Lightning D. It's actually just boiled in, so you're dealing with everything through Lightning D. It has a command pass-through for the JSON RPC, which allows plugins to add their own commands to the JSON RPC interface, so that, again, you don't have to deal with a plugin as a completely separate entity to configure it, use its commands. It's wrapped into the actual Lightning application. Event notifications allow plugins to actually deal with the notifications and data produced by Lightning D. And as well, they have introduced a hooks feature that allows plugins to monitor the actual events occurring in Lightning D and even alter the behavior of what LND is doing, Lightning D is doing, or create custom behaviors in response to different internal events in LND. So they have pretty much altered the entire architecture so that simply using plugins, which can be written in C, Python, Golang, or Java, using libraries produced by Blockstream, or really any language, as long as there's actually libraries set up to handle the C bindings and interact with that code. So this is pretty much making it as simple as possible to create custom behaviors or modify the behavior of C Lightning and Lightning D by integrating that design choice into the overall architecture. And like this is also something that they're going to use themselves. So you can be damn sure they're actually going to maintain the way that plugins actually interface with Lightning D proper. They're going to actually start ripping out different features of C Lightning and converting them into plugins. And they have already done this by migrating some of the code related to invoice payments into a pay plugin. So they're going to start further modularizing all of the different behavior of C Lightning beyond what they've already done in terms of isolating things into their own daemons, like separating key management, handling of routing and so on. And it's really this is a huge jump forward, I think, in terms of trying to make things as developer friendly and very simple to just kind of tinker with it and add new behavior and customize things. And really, the further that they, go through with this, the easier it's going to be to build in Lightning that require kind of tinkering with things. And they already have a plugin for autopilots for network probes to gather metrics about the network, for cross-chain atomic swaps, new RPC interfaces. And the more behavior they kind of pull out of the core code base and resign to plugins, the simpler it's going to be to tailor things to your actual use cases. For instance, with this paid plugin, let's say you're building an application that requires some kind of extra verification of external data before you want to go through with actually signing and paying an invoice. Well, before this, you would actually have to go into the code base of Lightning D and tinker around with the logic as to how a payment invoice is scanned, parsed, and when it's actually signed and the HTLT is sent across the network. Now, you simply pull out their pay plugin and drop in your own with your own extra logic. And this is exactly the kind of shit that is really going to just accelerate what is built on the Lightning Network. Like, make it as simple as possible for somebody to really look at what they're trying to do, look at what behavior they require out of their Lightning daemon, and then introduce that behavior with the least amount of friction, the least amount of hassle, and the least amount of worries in terms of what are these modifications that I'm making to this code base going to do? What kind of other effects are they going to have? I mean, like, I really have to say here, like, this is making me pretty confident that although from what I see, LND seems to be one of the, chosen code bases in terms of building things out with the Lightning Network, the further I see where Blockstream is really going with C Lightning, the more I think that this is going to just outstrip the other clients at the end of the day by far. Like, the core architecture has broken everything into its own isolated daemons to keep security critical things isolated, really control the interactions between them. This new plugin feature makes it way simpler to introduce new behaviors, features. Like, they are building this from the ground up to make this as simple as possible to actually build on. And I I am really excited to see what actually starts coming of this in the long term.
Heck yeah, man. Sounds like Blockstream's hitting it out of the park again, as usual. I mean, these guys, they just, they understand like what this ecosystem needs. And for sure, it's like a real easy way to build on top of Lightning. And, like you're saying, not have to break all the way down to the binaries and recompile just to see if everything's going to work out. And, you could just set these plugins on top and see how it works out. That sounds like it's definitely going to move everything forward in a pretty fast way with Lightning development. I mean, right now we've already seen it moving at a breakneck pace, but I mean, things could really take off to where, I mean, there's definitely been a lot of confusion into what's going on with this whole fork in the dApps world and all that stuff. And I'm really ready to see Lightning sort of just take over that moniker of like people just developing all these sort of things built on top. And it's this sort of plug-in feature that's going to allow that. And, just like also, looking at ways to, this route boosting for added privacy and logic for channel funding. It just all sounds like, major positives as far as helping out Lightning development. So, yeah, it sounds like, you're getting pretty jazzed about Lightning again.
Yeah, I mean, like, this plugin feature, like, I have like kind of a half-baked idea for a way to do custodial Lightning products in a way more private way, but it would require changing the way that the hash lock and the pre-image for it are actually selected and generated. And with all the other clients out there, I would have to go in, modify the code base, like deal with all those issues. But with where C Lightning is going, if they pull that logic out into a plugin, it's just grab that, replace it, modify it a little bit, and drop it in there. And like, my idea, if it's actually something workable and not just me chasing a dead end stupid, like, would be a million times easier to implement. And going down the line, like, this is really just going to help them implement shit as well. There's still like the spontaneous payments coming down the line, the rendezvous routing, as far as hiding the sender and the receiver in their identities from each other during a payment. Like, this is just exactly the kind of shit that we need to start seeing from Lightning, like things to are developing so that people can do what Blockstream is trying to.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you were breaking up there at the end. I mean, yeah, I mean, it looks like it's going to be a lot easier for anybody to just try and build out something that they're running through their mind instead of going through this, this big hassle of like digging through all the code and getting it all correct. But yeah, you want to give that another shot? Let's see how your connection's doing now.
Yeah, this is, it's not like a serious issue right now, but like there is this kind of dynamic here where we have like these three teams, and you have to kind of push stuff through them to build in like new features or behavior with Lightning, or kind of just walk off and go your own way. And that is kind of a barrier to entry in terms of building and developing things. But with this new plugin architecture from C Lightning, like this starts stripping away those barriers and makes it way easier for somebody to just go, I want to do this thing, but it requires some slight change in behavior or a new feature. They can just build the plugin and drop it in and just go from there. And it makes it like a lot easier to really come to the table and do something without having to deal with the politics and frictions of there being pretty much three main teams here building out Lightning clients.
It's fascinating, man, because, like you're saying, it's like Lightning's already taken off at a breakneck pace because everybody's starting to find out that it's like this, interesting way to try and scale Bitcoin and, get these transactions moving in a large volume, and everything's still falling back and settling on Bitcoin. And, that's got a lot of encouragement in the development community, where we've seen people that I thought would write off Lightning right away are coming back to say, well, this actually works. And, I'm going to start trying to tinker with it to see if I can build something. And now it's just going to be so much easier. So that's awesome development. So yeah, y'all want to say anything else on this before we go into the crazy news?
Go Blockstream. Go Axelberg.
Heck yeah, man. I'm going to keep rooting for you guys, Blockstream. I don't even have to. You guys are nailing it out of the park every time. So what's going on with an update on Coinbase and Conbase and Neutrino and all this madness that's been going on over the past 10 days now?
Yeah, so Shinobi, if you want to grab the short clip, if you have that available, because I'll want to play that in a bit. But believe it or not, the ongoing Coinbase scandal has just become even crazier today. I was checking the delete Coinbase hashtag, which, if you're not familiar with what that is or what that means, we've discussed it in the previous show. So I was checking that hashtag and I saw a tweet from Austin Alexander. His handle is @BTCismoney, who apparently worked at Kraken, and he linked to an interview that Christine Sandler, who is Coinbase's director of institutional sales, gave to Cheddar, which is, I think, a business news and entertainment outlet. And there was a 2-minute segment of that interview which they highlighted, where she talked about the XRP listing as well as the Neutrino acquisition, which has been the center of attention regarding the delete Coinbase stuff. And it has absolutely consumed my life since about February 20th. So yeah, play that clip. And I think if you don't immediately see what's wrong with what she said, then I'll explain afterwards.
People, we got it covered.
The asset would be classified as a security or not. Well, we're not securities lawyers. We felt that there were compelling arguments on either side to deem it a security or not. And we added it to the platform, much to the excitement of our client base. Should XRP be classified as a security? We actually have an infrastructure in place that would support that going forward. So to the extent that actually does happen, we'll be prepared for that as well.
Okay, so nothing in particular that changed, just because many had understood that Coinbase was going to wait for the SEC to give a little clarity on XRP's security status. That you guys just had this acquisition broker dealer, so I guess that helped in some places.
That's correct. So we acquired a broker-dealer late this summer, Keystone, that allows us to have that infrastructure. So to the extent that it is actually classified as a security, we'll be prepared for that. But in lieu of that, we thought we could add it to the platform because at the end of the day, we felt that there were really strong arguments on either side.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of acquisitions, let's talk about Neutrino.
Sure.
What's your perspective on that acquisition and the company's involvement in the hacking team?
Okay. Well, we are aware of the backgrounds of some of the folks that are involved in Neutrino, and we are looking into that. I think the compelling reason for making the acquisition was that Neutrino had some really industry-leading and best-in-class technology. And moreover, it was really important for us to migrate away from our current providers. Our current providers were actually selling client data to outside sources, and it was really compelling for us to kind of get control over that and have proprietary technology that we could leverage to keep the data safe and to protect our clients.
All right. So if you didn't hear that last part, she said that. So first she. Uh-oh.
All right. Sorry about that.
Okay, sorry everyone. I'll start over. So if you didn't hear that last part, she first praised Neutrino for having best-in-class technology. But then the even more jaw-dropping part was where she said that the reason they acquired Neutrino was because their previous blockchain analytics provider was, quote, selling client data to outside sources. And she says this after the 1 minute, 25-second mark. So as far as I'm aware, Coinbase has never disclosed any kind of data breach or data misuse incident relating to any of the analytics providers that they inevitably are plugged into. So I reshared this video on Twitter and I asked, is anyone aware of Coinbase disclosing a data breach related to an analytics provider publicly or privately to users? If not, they should feel compelled to disclose who that provider was and make customers aware of what data was leaked. And it should also be noted that part of Coinbase's privacy policy that is effective as of May 25th, 2018, last year, says that not only does Coinbase not sell data or rent or sell or rent personal information of their users, but third-party providers are also prohibited from doing so in their contract that they have with Coinbase. So going back in time a bit, when our last show ended on Wednesday, there was an absolutely hilarious development in terms of the delete Coinbase campaign on Twitter. If you're not already aware, Coinbase has a policy that accounts cannot be closed if they still have a balance. This is not in itself unusual because this is the case with a lot of other cryptocurrency exchanges as well as banks. The only case in which they would just close your account if you still had a balance is if they suspected you of doing something in violation of their terms of service or something criminal. But otherwise, if it's just a normal account closure that you're requesting, you have to first remove your balance. They can't just, even if you've been off the exchange for a very long time and you've left a certain amount of money on the exchange, they can't just, as far as I'm aware, banks and exchanges, they can't just close your account without at least trying to make contact with you and then trying to get you to take that balance off. So that part isn't unusual, but the problem with Coinbase is that they also have a dust limit. So if you have a certain amount of cryptocurrency in your account that is lower than their minimum limit for withdrawals, you cannot get rid of the balance, and hence you can never delete your Coinbase account without buying more Bitcoin to add to that dust and then transferring that all off of your account. So what happened? A bunch of people who wanted to delete their Coinbase accounts were basically stuck. But then Udi had a great idea. He started a delete Coinbase trust chain where Coinbase users with dust amounts were using the internal transfer system. I'm not sure if it's all using email, but I think that when you have a Coinbase account, you get an email type identifier that you can then send to other people so they can give you Bitcoin, or you can send Bitcoin to them that way. So they were using this internal transfer system to basically pass along their dust to other accounts. And then once that dust reached an account, that once the dust amount was above the dust limit, then that person could then obviously withdraw that Bitcoin, and everyone who had had the dust before could close their accounts. So then even more weirdness happened when people started doing that. A couple of hours into the trust chain activity, Coinbase users were not only reporting issues with continuing the internal transfers, they were basically being blocked from transferring the dust to other Coinbase accounts, but there was even some people that had completed all of the necessary steps required to close their account, but Coinbase was still giving them a strange pop-up saying that they could not close their account at this time. If you look into the, I created like a Twitter moment where it has, I think, at least 2 or 3 of these tweets. There was at least a couple of people who then contacted the Coinbase support desk, and the support desk was telling them that it may take them 5 to 7 business days to close the account, if not longer, and that they would be passing along the issue with the account closure to an account specialist, which was hilarious because on what kind of service does it require? Should it require a specialist to close a person's account? So that was particularly insane. That was what happened right after the show ended on Wednesday. Other things that have happened, I was contacted by Bitcoin Magazine early on in the whole scandal, specifically involving Neutrino, not the data breach, which is a new thing that just came up today, or the potential data breach with an analytics provider. So I was interviewed by Bitcoin Magazine and provided a lot of other details about history. But probably the most interesting part of the article that was published by Bitcoin Magazine was that they also reached out to a woman who was actually a target of hacking team, or she was a target of her own government who was using hacking team software. And I believe that was also part of the investigation that Citizen Lab did into Hacking Team, which ended up being very influential in terms of the UN inquiry and also the various European authorities, including the Italian government, deciding that they needed to restrict Hacking Team's export permissions, and then eventually their business really collapsed. They were running out of money and they were afraid of bankruptcy. And now what they've done, a bunch of them have gone off and spawned other companies trying to distance themselves from their former business as much as possible, not really being very successful. I mean, these guys put their pictures and their names right on the website, and if you search their names, immediately comes up Hacking Team. Another instance that I saw recently was that Eric Rabe, who was the spokesperson for Hacking Team and joined or created another company. He was, I think, the chief marketing officer for Grey Heron Technologies in the UK, and they were marketing exploits for Signal and Telegram. So these guys are still out there operating, but that was kind of old history. The new information is regarding the fact that the director of institutional sales basically just leaked the fact that one of their analytics providers had been selling Coinbase user data. We have no idea what kind of data, how much they had access to. It could be very mild, number of transactions, I don't know, but it could be anything up to identity documents. It all depends on the kind of service they're providing, because a lot of these analytics providers, some of them are not only blockchain analytics, but they're also KYC services that help you be compliant with those kinds of policies. So who knows what kind of data they had access to. And, for a lot of people, with the neutrino stuff, it was like, well, I'm probably not going to be affected by that, but my principals tell me that this is wrong and I'm going to, delete my account. In this case, with this potential, misuse of their data, this could mean that someone out there has access to identity documents, financial history, residential documents, anything that Coinbase decided it was important to collect and share with third parties, which we don't know the scope of that. but that must be extremely scary to a bunch of people because you don't know who knows that information. You don't know how much information they have, and that could potentially be very dangerous to a bunch of people. We've covered a number of stories before where Bitcoiners and other people involved in cryptocurrency have been physically attacked, if not killed, either related to the fact that it was known that they were involved in Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, or just because, you know, they happened to be involved in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and that became a story when they were attacked. But either way, this is a really dangerous position to be in. And I mean, if this doesn't convince you that KYC AML policies and what they require people to do in terms of giving up very sensitive personal information is a poison pill and should be eliminated as much as possible, I don't know what will. It seems like every time a story like this comes up, you'll see people that say, we need this, but all it ends up doing is putting people in danger. And then you have companies like Coinbase who apparently don't disclose the fact when data is misused or shared with people that it shouldn't be shared with. And, you know, I mean, it's really covering the story. It's like amazing how you can have the lowest opinion possible of these companies and these people running them, and they still end up disappointing you or surprising you in the level of their stupidity, malevolence, negligence. It still surprises me, even though it probably shouldn't.
Yeah, this is a never-ending thing, it looks like, with Coinbase. Like, I could hardly believe that. I mean, I guess they're trying to control the narrative. That's like what I was also looking into from all this, was just like the response of a company is just like, can we steer the narrative? And I mean, maybe this was their best attempt to try and maybe this wasn't even a gap. Maybe like she was supposed to go out there and say something that was maybe as equally shocking to just sort of try and justify it. But the justification sounds so ridiculous about, you know, industry leading best in class technology, you know, proprietary software to keep clients' data secure. This is all about just hiring the engineers that understand the very weak infrastructures built within our, you know, this infrastructure of the internet. They understand where these weak points are, and they understand how to take advantage of them. They're not about increasing the data security. They're not about trying to make your data secure. It's just aggravating that that's the sort of like narrative that they're going to try and approach, just to sort of, I guess, get people confused. Or maybe it was a gaffe. Maybe she went out there and just sort of spoke, you know, without really thinking that much about it. But either way, it's just, yeah, I mean, here's another data breach, and, you know, it's got me a little bit worried. But for sure, there's you know, it's just like, that's the problem across the board with all these infrastructures that are built on the way that we've been doing things in the past. It's time to look at this ecosystem and what we're trying to do. And it's got, yeah, it's not about, you know, taking advantage of those weak parts of the infrastructure and trying to secure your data that way. It's just like, that's just like drowning. I mean, there's no treading water on that. It's, you're just like, you're grabbing somebody that's going to be an anchor to sink you to the bottom of the ocean. It's an awful idea.
Yeah, this is pretty much like perfectly in line with what I was saying when, you know, we first covered this. Like, they, well, one, clearly like violated laws all over the place, not disclosing this very promptly. But like the whole rationale is like they want this in house. They want a chain analysis service that they own so that they can fully utilize every bit of their customer data in actually watching activity on chain, and not have to worry about getting analysis that is less accurate because of any limitations on what they share with another company, or deal with the kind of risks that obviously proved dumb gambles in sharing any private information with other chain analysis services. Like, they want that in house, because then they don't have to worry about all of the issues regarding sharing your data, and they can fully utilize every bit of it because it's still maintained under the ownership and management of Coinbase. Like, they are, like, this is all just about ramping up chain analytics use to as large of a scale as possible, while mitigating the consequences of not having that done in-house. And like, honestly, I would not be shocked if we some point down the line, see them attempt to start reselling or getting other people to use their services, because they can apply all of their customer data as one of the biggest companies in this space to potentially get a lot more accurate analysis and simply selectively share that analysis with other people, instead of just, this wall between them and other entities with the private data. It's a lot more valuable for them to do this analysis in-house and be able to share the results of that without having to worry about the complications of sharing your private information to other people.
Oh man, all done through subsidiaries or like just people in-house and NDAs. It's it's definitely bad practice.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, like, as far as I could tell, and what Austin could tell, who found the clip first, he thinks that that Christine likely didn't know that this was a secret and probably just leaked it inadvertently. If she didn't, I mean, that would be a stupid thing to do, because, I mean, for example, for any customers that they have that are subject to GDPR or protected or whatever terminology you want to use, under the GDPR, if there is any incident of like a data breach, or I assume that also misuse of data, like unauthorized disclosure, if that also falls under data breach, then they have 72 hours once they become aware of that to make the affected customers aware. So if they did not do that, they're in violation of GDPR, plain and simple. That's not including, the obviously whatever effect the data breach or data misuse may have had on the affected customers. Like, it's a violation of GDPR just in itself to not notify customers within 72 hours.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's definitely some, gross mishandling, and I mean, like, yeah, I mean, the GDPR is something that they could have violated, but I'm looking at these other stories too that we're about to do, and I'm just like thinking about, that FATF, the G20, they're all trying to, move this whole idea of a standard of KYC, AML across the G20 countries, and it's just it's like which side are you gonna fight for? And yeah, I mean, I don't know. We're caught up in a whole bunch of legal hangups right now with a bunch of legal gray zones, and these guys are incorporated in Silicon Valley, but they're doing business where they're also under this GDPR, and it's just a nightmare scenario for these guys. I don't understand how they're going to be around much longer. I mean, they're probably going to play this alt game as much as they can, but I mean, the amount of Coinbase users leaving, that might be like, well, whatever number it is, because I mean, I don't think we're getting real statistics on any of that yet, but it'll probably be a little while. And, even when we do get some information, I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't truthful. I mean, this is where it's like all of this that we're doing is built on these new networks of trust and people understanding like this roadmap of that we need this financial freedom and financial sovereignty, and like we need some restoration to our privacy rights, and like very, this kind of data that's very, if that gets taken, yeah, people could see how much actual Bitcoin you're holding and where you're living, and then they can start trying to figure out a way to get towards you. And if this is like a practice that's going on across these different G20 countries and all these exchanges, like this is just like setting them up for failure in this space. I mean, like, this is all about building this out correctly. I mean, and I wish people would get to that, but a lot of these speculators from traditional markets and people that are working in finance and that are building out these first generation exchanges, they're not really thinking about all that stuff, and they're thinking a little bit short term. So yeah, it's terrible to see, but I'm sure we'll keep watching it develop.
Yeah, and just quickly as a last thought, I want to reiterate that if there are any Coinbase employees who have knowledge or thoughts on any of these topics, please reach out to me or one of the journalists who has been giving a lot of coverage of this story. especially if you have knowledge, regardless of whether you're a Coinbase employee or not, if you know what provider she may have been referencing in terms of the previous one that was selling client data, also reach out for that, because let's just say it's not going to remain a secret for long.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty. So next up. Bitcoin SV, the Satoshi's Vision Team, with financial support from CoinGeek and Calvin Ayre, has found 3 super critical security vulnerabilities in Bitcoin Core that were totally not Bitcoin SV or ABC's fault whatsoever. The core team is incompetent. There's 3 bugs they had no fucking clue of that could crash the entire Bitcoin network to a halt. No, not really. So, the first air quote vulnerability that they found, CVE 2018 1000891, in their words, would enable an attacker to send specially crafted network packets to the target node that would needlessly consume large amounts of processor and network resources. This attack could result in a denial of service by exhausting processor and network resources and would not be detected or prevented by the software. Okay, the reality is that when a node communicates with another node, they pass a checksum with whatever message they're passing. Now, there are a number of things that could happen in transit, such as just a bit corruption, things being parsed wrong by a firewall, yada yada, that could result in the checksum being invalidated, while the message itself is not. And so effectively, you could wind up having a valid transaction, for instance, be relayed with an invalid checksum, and okay, something's going to go wonky there. Now, this being claimed as a vulnerability is absurd. Like, this is exactly why messages have this checksum. Like, you can pass things around, and if you get a valid message with an invalid checksum, okay, it's a valid message. If you get a message that's been corrupted somehow but was valid, that checksum allows you to determine that this isn't matching what I was supposed to get. Now, the issue here is you need to actually determine whether or not you should be banning a node based on what they're sending you. And this checksum helps prevent a node from being banned when they shouldn't be. Like, if something just went wrong in transit and this valid transaction had a few bits flipped and it winds up invalid, you can see that this is not what that node intended to send me, and you cannot ban it for no reason, because this would start creating disconnections in the network graph, which could potentially cause problems. So calling this denial of service vulnerability is just kind of ridiculous and absurd. And really, like, Bitcoin Core is trying to kind of move away from using banning as a solution to things as much as possible. Like, this isn't really any kind of issue. And ultimately, it like, to call this a vulnerability, you get a message with an invalid checksum, is beyond absurd. That's like calling the ability to send data to another node a vulnerability because you can toss lots of data at them. That's how these things work. You're running a node that talks to other nodes on the internet that can send you data. They can send you a lot of data. The second vulnerability is air quote vulnerability. We'll go back to how they spell this out. The second vulnerability, CVE 2018-100892, would similarly enable an attacker to send specially crafted network packets, which would needlessly consume large amounts of processor and network resources. The attack could result in a denial of service by exhausting processor and network resources and would not be detected or prevented by the software. The reality is, I can send your node a bunch of messages going, give me the headers for blocks. And that could sap up a lot of bandwidth. while literally any peer-to-peer protocol involving peers communicating and passing data between them can result in a lot of information being requested. That's not a vulnerability. That's an inherent aspect of the design. And more importantly, you can very conveniently limit the amount of data that your node will upload. It's in the configuration file. It's a standard command line option. People do it all the time when they don't want to waste a bunch of bandwidth uploading things. To call this a vulnerability is absolutely fucking absurd. The last one, the third vulnerability, CVE 2018-100-893, would also enable an attacker to send specially crafted network packets, which would needlessly consume large amounts of memory resources. The attack could result in a denial of service by exhausting memory resources and causing system failure. The attack would not be detected or prevented by the software. Well, what this is you get a transaction and then you have to deserialize it from the compressed format that it's in going around the network. And this has been dealt with a long time ago. There are actually limits in place in Bitcoin Core as far as how much memory it will allocate in a buffer for data it's receiving. And it will actually make sure that you're going to actually get data to fill a buffer before you actually, create that. And it's also set up in a way with the maximum message size on the network, which is around 4 megabytes, the size of the biggest SegWit block you can make, which is pretty much as big as one thing can actually be. And also, ultimately, there are just limits based on how many peers you're connected to, how much data they can pass at a time, and how much memory that could eat up. This is not an issue. This is something that was addressed a long time ago by looking at buffer sizes and how you're handling data and memory that you're receiving from other nodes. This is absolutely not a vulnerability. This is not something you have to worry about whatsoever. And like all of these air quote vulnerabilities are literally just either things that have been dealt with already or are absolutely not vulnerabilities. They're just things that are inherent in literally any piece of software that talks to other peers on a network passing data on the internet. Like, this is just the most pathetic and absurd attempt in the world to try and just go, oh my God, the Bitcoin Core developers let these bugs through and didn't even know. And the funny thing is, the last one is absolutely not in any way whatsoever an issue with Bitcoin Core. It's only an issue when you look at Bitcoin ABC or Bitcoin SV and you have massive amounts of data that can be passed around, like, 128 megabyte blocks. So let's give a round of applause for the short bus and their pathetic attempts to seem like they're competent or relevant in any way whatsoever.
Oh man, yeah. Is this a surprise? I mean, like at this point, it's like I feel like they're just trying to get us to talk about him. I mean, yeah, this is pretty aggravating to see them do. I mean, yeah, they're joking, or they're not even joking around. They're saying these are vulnerabilities, but that's, yeah, like you're saying, this is the mechanics of the system that's meant to operate this way for, different parts of the way that we're doing, sending transactions around. So, yeah, it's like, where is the vulnerability listed about if I want to self-validate a Bitcoin SV transaction and the fact that I can't do that? It's just, that's not a security vulnerability in their eyes because,
Dude, you can totally use SPV and just see that it was in a block and not validate anything else in the block. That validates the transaction, bro. Don't you even Satoshi's vision, bro?
Obviously not, man. That's just like where it's like two totally different views. I mean, even on the disclosure of this, it's like if there was a real vulnerability, like would you go disclose it like this? Like this is not the way you would disclose an actual vulnerability. This is just like a marketing campaign to try
to be fair, they did contact developers behind the scenes and yada yada before they pushed this out, but it's the fact remains these are not vulnerabilities at all. This is not anything that anybody needs to worry about. This is them just stating the sky is blue and trying to act like that's a problem.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it sounds like they're just trying to, figure out a way to get us to talk about them. Because I mean, like that, I don't understand how that's even taken seriously. I mean, I guess Kevin Pham's got enough followers to where people think he's serious or something. Like the small amount of SV guys they got running around with them, like, yeah, it's really just a joke. And yeah, this kind of shows they just don't understand what exactly is going on here in Bitcoin. There's a lot of that. It's still going on.
Mm-hmm.
All
All
right,
right.
but these guys know what's going on. So what's going on with these guys?
So Casa has released some new news. They are rolling out some new features for their Keymaster wallet on iOS and Android, and creating new tiers of products for people to use. So obviously their main product is the 3 of 5 hardware wallet setup, where 3 keys are on a hardware wallet, 1 is held by Casa and the other on your mobile device, to enable very high value individuals to secure their coins in a very robust, recovery friendly way. But as of right now, their Keymaster wallet also now supports single key use. So you can use it with 1 key for free, just as a normal wallet. They are also introducing 2 new membership tiers. The silver membership, which is pretty much a 2 of 3 multi-sig with 1 on your phone, 1 on a hardware wallet that you provide, 1 that Casa holds, and of course access to the 1 key wallet. And to create a wallet is free. But the catch is, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you lose one of those keys that you control and need to recover your funds, each use of their recovery feature will pretty much incur a fee of 0.1% of all of the funds secured in your wallet. So this effectively allows you to have a multi-sig wallet with recovery service through Casa, but only pay if you actually have to use that recovery service. There is no personalized support or anything with this membership level. It's simply FAQs that are publicly available and community tools, and access to their health check and intelligence briefing services. Above this, they now have a gold membership with $300 per year is the fee, which comes with the 2 of 3 phone, hardware wallet, and Casa holding a key, as well as a Casa node, a Trezor 1 to function as the hardware wallet key, a surprise gift, an unlimited amount of key recoveries without a per recovery fee like the silver level from the 2 of 3 wallet, as well as direct email support from Casa. And then their platinum membership is effectively the 3 of 5 with a Casa node, phone and email services, and 6 hardware wallets in total from Casa, your choice of a Trezor ledger, with 3 held in reserve by them for any kind of emergency where you lose a wallet, as well as a gift and exclusive look at new products. The Diamond membership comes with everything in the gold, as well as support for multi-user signings, such as family or friends or teams or so on, with multiple people in control of the wallet, as well as inheritance planning. And so there's really 2 things I want to say about this. First, like, it is, I think, nice to see them setting up this tier where people can get access to software capable of some solid multi-sig security at very different price points, with all of them having some kind of access to a recovery in case of losing one of the keys. But I do have to say, I would absolutely never use this service so long as the code for this wallet remains closed source. And I would actively advise everybody out there to not touch this until that code is open source and somebody can actually go through it. Because until it is, you effectively have no clue what the code is doing as far as managing the keys. You don't even know if your wallet is genuinely set up using the keys that you set it up with, or if there are any other branches in the path that could allow different spending conditions. And I mean, it's not to say that I don't trust Casa to some degree, that I actively think that they would be malicious and do something shady with this. But I absolutely do not think it is appropriate in this space to be using closed source software to manage your private keys. And they have made some comments that they intend to open source things going forward. But until they do, I would advise people to kind of just keep an eye on this and steer clear of this software.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting development. I mean, you know, a lot of people seem to want to use the 203 multi-sig setup, and, you know, pretty interesting way of like sort of setting in a little bit of way to, you know, kind of an incentive to make sure you don't lose your two private keys, and also like a sort of like a little bit of way to recover revenue for Casa as far as that 0.1% of all the holdings if you know, they recover that. And that's pretty interesting. And you know, Casa's taken some steps here, and you know, it's pretty, like, Casa seems to be like one of those companies that sort of first came out with this whole idea of, like, you know, selling these node hardware models. And throughout their development process, it does feel like they've been taking all this stuff in steps. And I could see them keeping it like this for a little while to just sort of test the waters. And yeah, for sure, like, don't put large amounts of Bitcoin in this, you know, with it being closed source. But I could see somebody wanting to tinker around with it just to sort of see how it's set up with small amounts. And, you know, I'm sure, like they're saying, over time, they will open source the code on that. Just, you know, just doing it in steps to make sure that everything's done correctly. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's going to be a good thing that'll probably be used a lot in the future once, you know, it does go open source.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you know, there's no reason that they wouldn't. Like, their service is pretty much just holding the key to enable you to recover your funds. So I mean, ultimately, like, the code being open source has no material effect on their business. But you know, it is nice to see once this is open source. I think this is going to be a very good thing going forward, you know, giving people the ability to have some kind of recovery mechanism for funds without having to pay some kind of membership fee. Like, it's just a one-off fee to actually use the recovery service.
Yeah, that definitely sounds a lot better for the consumer.
So I guess that pretty much wraps that up. You want to
Yeah.
take us into this next chunk you got, Rick?
Yeah, all right. So, yeah, going from one company doing good things to another, Square Cash released their fourth quarter earnings report for 2018, and their sales topped some $52 million. Their earnings report from the second and third quarter showed a steady increase in sales throughout 2018. They had earned $37 million in the second quarter and $43 million in the third. And with this fourth quarter showing over 52 million, it looks like the retail side of Bitcoin is doing pretty good business. I searched for some recent figures for Coinbase to see if I could make a comparison on how they are doing, but couldn't turn up any statements from the company on their Bitcoin sales. And it's, you know, 52 million. It's not the hugest amount of volume in terms of major Bitcoin exchanges, but it does show a steady increase in the adoption of people using the Cash App to buy Bitcoin. It looks like they are really finding their niche with the retail side of Bitcoin now that Circle stepped away and Coinbase is ignoring it. They're capitalizing, and Dorsey is actively experimenting with Bitcoin and Lightning. Just this past Friday, Jack posted a tweet where he received a Casa HodlHodl node and was looking around his Lightning Explorer. That plus, he recently told CNBC, quote, "For the year ahead, we continue to focus on three things and will continue to strengthen our omni-challenge offering. That means that we add strength to in-person payments, to mobile payments, and also to online payments. We're also really excited. We're really excited about everything we are doing in financial services." Close quote. So yeah, it looks like and sounds like Square Cash is focused on building out this side of the space. However, there are a couple of things they have neglected to implement that would really help everyone. First, like we were talking about, Shinobi, enable deposits, Jack. Come on. If we could get deposits enabled, it would be so much easier for anyone to spend their Bitcoin and that cash card. And then second is that I know a lot of people on Twitter would like an auto buy option. And then lastly, it would be really great to hear the company come out in opposition to the California Bill AB 1489 we reported on last episode. It's called the Virtual Currency Business Regulation Bill. And, you know, it really just neuters a Bitcoin's business ability to serve the customer. Hopefully we'll see something like that, because that could show some opposition to these other major Silicon Valley companies who are determined to build out this surveillance state. So yeah, that's what's going on with Square Cash, and just a little bit of earnings report. You guys think anything they could do to increase that earnings, or how are they doing on all this type of stuff?
I definitely think getting cards or deposits set up for that card and a seamless integration like Shift Card, where you can simply leave your balance in Bitcoin and have that handled in the back end when you use the card, would be a very nice thing going forward and help drive things. But I mean, it's good to see Square, constantly seeing steady growth. It's the core of this space is getting completely away from third parties everywhere you can, but we're still going to need on-ramps for quite a long while to come. And I would much prefer companies like Square that haven't actively attacked or undermined Bitcoin, in their presence in the space so far, start displacing a lot of companies like Coinbase, because it's clear as fucking day. Conbase is just attacking and undermining the space in every way possible. And they need to have their market share eaten up by more responsible companies more in tune with the actual users.
Yeah, I mean, this steady growth, like we're saying on this Bitcoin retail side, it's like they're staying all Bitcoin. That Cash App, you can't buy any of these other alts. Like it's just Bitcoin, and you can buy and sell Bitcoin. And we see they're experimenting with these, with the Lightning Network and these hardware nodes, and it seems like they're, really intent on trying to capture that market share. And I think that's going to be really big, going forward. I mean, we're going to eventually see these alts diverge from Bitcoin, like we saw from that tear from 11.8 to 20, whenever it was like, nope, these guys can't follow Bitcoin this high. And, eventually those alts go the opposite way. And I don't know how long it's going to take for them to go all the way down, but it sounds like, just looking at this space with Coinbase and the way that they're building out this, and they want to, scale with, Zcash and Ethereum and Litecoin and Bcash and all these different other networks, where we know that they're, have different spots that are, you could censor these transactions, and especially through Coinbase. So it would be good to see their market share get eaten. But Janine, did you have any comment on Square Cash before we go into HodlHodl?
Yeah, I would say that Square is currently one of the companies that I'm the least worried about in terms of custodial on-ramp options, but I'm still personally of the mind that I'm not going to recommend anything custodial like as my first option to people. I'm still going to recommend, decentralized or peer-to-peer stuff first. And obviously I personally, even if I were to say, Square sounds good, I don't see anything wrong with them, that could always change in the future, and it all depends on what their own, data collection policies are. I mean, they all have them if you're a custodian. And I personally am, like, especially after all this Coinbase stuff, I have never used KYC services for cryptocurrency stuff, and I am going to try really hard to keep doing that.
Yeah, like we're saying, these on-ramps, they're kind of one of these necessary parts of the space, and it is always hard to sort of look down the road and see where these guys are actually going. And I think that it's interesting to look at, Jack Dorsey and Twitter and the whole battle of censorship and the way that that's all, building out. And I think Jack has been, as far as like CEOs of a company that's dealing with this censorship, he's probably been the most open about it, as far as going on a podcast to discuss it and then saying that he's going to return to discuss it even further. And, after Joe Rogan does some more studying on this stuff. So it'd be interesting to see where they want to go. So, yeah, so we're tight on time. Let's, we got a special edition this evening. So let's keep going through this. Just a quick announcement from out of HodlHodl. They're introducing a new product sometime this spring called Predictions, where they are making a move into the prediction markets. We've seen the release of Bitcoin futures from the traditional sector, and major exchanges like BitMEX have been the go-to place for Bitcoiners to place their futures contracts. And Augur has attempted to do something similar to these new predictions contracts by allowing anyone to bet on anything, but it's built on Ethereum, and where there's problems with multisig issues, and Augur has issues with oracles. So HodlHodl is using a 2-3 multisig to lock up Bitcoin in escrow, and its release is dependent upon the parties agreeing on the outcome of the situation. If there is a disagreement, HodlHodl holds the third key and will be the final arbiter of that contract. So HodlHodl had this to say in the announcement, quote, "All in all, we at HodlHodl believe this will be a perfect and long-awaited instrument for the ecosystem. We especially want to point out that this is not gambling. Gambling is generally activity that involves instant gratification, expectation, fast execution, and randomness. Prediction market we are working on is nothing like that. It emphasizes low time preference, financial planning, and responsibility. And of course, the Bitcoins are locked in multi-sig escrow, which is orders of magnitude safer than keeping money on centralized exchanges," close quote. And yeah, I think I have to agree with that statement. And it will be interesting to see how these contracts develop on an exchange that operates in a more decentralized way. So did you guys have anything to say about this new 2-3 multi-sig for HodlHodl predictions?
I mean, it's kind of interesting, I guess, especially the limitation of amounts where you can kind of set a minimum volume so you don't have people spamming ridiculously low volumes. And, especially the ability to set odds is a good thing with stuff like this. But I mean, yeah, it's nice to see something like this implemented that actually acknowledges you are dependent on an oracle and not create some nonsense mumbo jumbo that tries to pretend like you aren't. But like, I really don't find prediction markets that interesting. I mean, like, honestly, I think they're kind of an oxymoron. Like, all markets are prediction markets. All markets are predicting some kind of outcome. That's like what they do. But yeah, I guess it's kind of cool that they did this and didn't try to act like, distributing an oracle magically makes it not an oracle.
Yeah, I think, like you're saying, I mean, there's different ways to come into the market. And to me, it's either you're long or you're short, and, you hold your position all the way through and through. But, there's people out there that like to play both sides and see how it goes. But, Janine, do you have any comment on this before we go on?
No, it's just HodlHodl is one of the exchanges I recommend as an option, or have been recommending as an option for people to use who don't know any other options besides Coinbase. The only problem is that if you're a American, you're not allowed to use HodlHodl. So, oops.
Yeah, that's right.
Not quite as peer-to-peer, but I understand why they did that though. But if you are an American, there's Bisq.
Right. Bisq and HodlHodl, those are the guys that, they're doing the decentralized thing. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see the way it goes. So, just a couple more stories out of me right for in this line. It's like just a brick of stories I'm doing here. So let's cut away from those technicals and get into California. So We have another bill coming down the pipe in California. This one introduced by the Blockchain Advocacy Coalition, titled the Medicinal and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act. And as you can imagine from the title, it's got to do with helping the cannabis industry out there on the West Coast. Now, real quickly, just want to clarify, this bill is AB 953, no relation to that bit license, AB 1489. And this bill was proposed by Assembly Member Phil Ting on February 20th in California's 19th State Assembly District. It's attempting to allow business owners in the cannabis industry the ability to pay their taxes in cryptocurrencies, which that sounds like a great thing from my vantage point here in Colorado. Last episode, we also reported on Bitcoin's mom's business bank account being shut down for working in the cannabis industry. These markets are heavily censored and have to suffer gross inefficiencies to operate. Alexandria Medina of the BAC says, quote, the current recommendation from the state of California to cannabis businesses is that they use armored vehicles to pay their taxes. That's inefficient and risky. It's closer to how one might pay taxes during the gold rush with a stagecoach and a gunman than how you would pay California taxes in 2019, close quote. So this blockchain advocacy group will be educating and lobbying lawmakers to understand the need for this technology to help the industry. It appears that right now they are recommending the use of a stablecoin to do this, but they aren't specific as to which one. Medina said, quote, work to create standards for what kind of coins and wallets the state uses to make sure we have the highest degree of stability and safety for both the state and business, close quote. And that's an interesting play because it could be done without the stablecoin, but they might be wording it like this to see if one of these major companies starting a stablecoin will help them lobby for this bill's passage. I'm not sure what the best answer is because I've also thought about this in the past and came down to using a regional stablecoin that would be used across multiple industries. But that was really about market clarity on price, not large settlement like annual taxes for the cannabis industry. So either way, I think it would be a great thing to see the cannabis industry be allowed to pay their taxes in cryptocurrencies. It would be a major use case for dispensaries, as it would save them much of the overhead they have to produce in order to currently pay their taxes. So it sounds like this could be a good bill coming down the pipe for California that will actually help markets. What do you guys have to say about this proposed bill?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be definitely a good option as opposed to shuffling cash around. We've gone over that like pretty much every time the topic of the cannabis industry has come up. Like it is just a huge cost overhead, a safety issue. Like it's like all the regulatory situations and laws kind of pushing that as a requirement is just putting people in that market at risk for doing something that is perfectly legal according to their own states.
Yeah, it's definitely something we keep coming back to because, whenever it comes to finding efficiencies, in the marketplace, they're not always easy to spot, but this one is fairly blatant and like fairly easy to point out, and hopefully lawmakers can get on the same page about this because, yeah, I think it would help the industry greatly. So, do you have any comment on this one, Janine? Go to the Thai SEC story next.
Nope, good to go.
All right, so going from the West Coast to the Far East here, we got a couple of announcements from the Thai SEC this past week. The first came on Thursday and set new standards for ICOs in the country, regulating which base pairs can be used for the offerings. According to the press release, quote, the latest update has resulted in the total of 4 cryptocurrencies for ICO investments and base trading pairs, namely 1 Bitcoin, BTC, 2 Ethereum, 3 Ripple, and 4 Stellar. Also, 3 other cryptocurrencies have been removed from the list, namely 1 Bitcoin Cash, BCH, Ethereum Classic, and Litecoin, close quote. Bitcoinist reports that Thai SEC said its decision would have no impact on investors, judging from the fact that crypto exchanges in the country do not list the blacklisted tokens as base pairs. which that might be true, but I imagine some people speculating on these currencies are either going to love this news or hate it. And we'll see how that goes. But the next announcement came on the following day on Friday, and the Thai SEC is requesting feedback from stakeholders in the industry on proposed sets of standardized rules for data submission. According to the press release on Friday, quote, a standardized database would not only benefit the supervision of digital asset businesses, but would also promote cooperation between business operators and the SEC in optimizing the use of relevant data to create a clear picture of the overall digital asset industry, laying out digital asset market development plan, as well as solving problems and preventing risk, close quote. The Thai SEC says stakeholders have until March 13th of this year to submit their feedback on the subject. That's just 10 days from now. So if you guys have some stake in the development of the cryptocurrency ecosystem over there in Thailand, you guys might want to reach out to the Thai SEC here shortly. They are looking to improve their system on 2 data points, transaction data and profile data. It would be good to see their regulations were built on some good feedback from the community on how they could help the industry and not hurt it. So that's what's going on in Thailand. What do you guys think about this?
I think it's fucking hysterical. Like, oh my God. Thailand's like literally just killed 2 of the main ways that you can artificially pump up the value of a shitcoin for Bcash. Like trying to use it as a means for an ICO, which artificially creates demand for it to buy into the ICO, and then using it as a base pair for other shit coins, which like builds up volume to trade back and forth between shit coins. So like those are like 2 of the most common ways to try to pump like a large shit coin, is to like use it for both of those things, so you can artificially draw volume to trade around into other crap. And they pretty much just completely pulled the rug out on being able to do that there with Bcash.
Yeah, that's where I was kind of laughing about it myself and just like, okay, I guess they're gonna pick who's doing what over there, and it looks like Bcash and ETC lost the race on that one, and it looks like they just sort of added Litecoin to the mix. So yeah, I guess they're picking out who's they're going to say is okay to work in the country, and they could say, yeah, it's not going to really have an effect on the market because they're the ones choosing which base pairs operate in their country. But I'm kind of confident some people are going to look at that and say, all right, well, maybe I want to exit Bcash or ETC or LTC, but I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. This stuff is still ongoing, so waiting on some feedback from stakeholders there. If you've got some stake in Thailand in the crypto economy over there, be sure to leave a comment.
I just think it's funny that they're even like aware enough of the dynamics in the space to see that that's how things work, and then actually do something to try and counteract a couple of scams.
Yeah, I mean, Thailand's been, one of these guys that are, as far as people building out regulations and stuff, it seems like they want to build this stuff out the correct way, and they're trying to keep the people of Thailand, from making some poor investments. So, yeah, it's pretty comical. So, what else is pretty comical, man? Like, we got some more BSV nonsense here.
Let me know if my connection starts crapping out again. But alrighty, so it is here, the time you have all been waiting for. Satoshi's greatest invention ever. Enter Metanet! So this is a really absurdly retarded idea to just shove a bunch of random data on the blockchain. It almost seems like this is like all the ideas that Bcashers come up with. It's like, what kind of random useless shit can we shove on the blockchain? But Metanet is now live. You can now add a file to the Bcash blockchain up to 310 megabytes in size. just go to ad.beco.media. And now, the really funny thing about this, I think, is not only is this absolutely retarded, and exactly why Bcash is just destined to either completely fail or wind up in a giant data center that you need people's permission to access. Because when you stuff shit like this in the blockchain, you can't just prune it or get rid of it. You have to have all of this garbage data to validate the blockchain, because it's part of the Merkle tree in a block. And if you just start cutting out all of this stupid shit, you can't actually validate the block. So like they're digging themselves a hole here. But this is integrated with Money Button, which hilariously demonstrates a huge scaling issue with Bcash. So Money Button, you pretty much just drop your money in there, you slide the button, you pay whatever. But it has a problem where you start trying to use it a lot, and a block hasn't come yet. You can only have, I think, like, what is it, 20, or is it, sorry, 1 second, let me find this number. You can only have 25 unconfirmed transactions in a chain where one is dependent on the previous one in the mempool. And then it'll start evicting new transactions in that chain. So when you try to use this Metanet stupidity with Money Button, if it's a big file and you need to keep swiping the Money Button, it goes, sorry, you can't use it anymore. And so Money Button's solution to this is we'll just fragment your UTXOs. Just use this nice speed limit fix button, and it'll take your one UTXO and make 10. So you can have 10 times the amount of chained unconfirmed transactions. And their solution, air quote, to this scaling issue is let's just fragment things and make the UTXO set even more unscalable because we're just incentivizing making it bigger and bigger and bigger with crazy sized blocks that allow it to just explode in size. And so, like, it's just absurd. Like, everything coming from that entire ecosystem is just like the most absurd, like, deranged nonsense that is just completely ignoring reality. It is more dependent on magical fairies and unicorns to just ride along and make things work than fucking Ethereum is. Like,
oh my God. Yeah. This is bad. I mean, like, I was looking at it last night, and yeah, as soon as you go on there, like, it's like, oh no, a bug. And I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous, though. It's like, upload anything and everything to this blockchain. Like, why? Like, is it just follow that same stupid story of where it's like, because it's a blockchain, it's secure, without looking at any of the actual mechanics that make those things secure? I mean, because, yeah, that's what I imagine it is, because it's just like, that's a prevalent thing throughout the space. It looks like they're just trying to capitalize on that misunderstanding.
Dude, a blockchain is magic, Rick, okay? If I upload my entire Blu-ray collection onto a blockchain, okay, it's magic. That one data center that's actually storing it, it can't delete anything or refuse to let me download it because it's magic. It's a blockchain, okay? Don't you understand that blockchain is like, it's magic, okay? No matter how big it is or how few copies of it are, I can always download it no matter what the person with that copy of it says or thinks. It's fucking magic, dude.
Yeah, and they got their unicorns out on Twitter talking about how magical it is. And, I'm sure they're going to trick some people. And this is where it's like, man, these things are just delaying people from actually figuring out what's going on here. Because, I mean, I've had some interactions here locally recently where it's just like, these people, they came to me and they're like, hey, you sound like you know something, like we should meet and, we talk. And it's just like, they've kind of been led down this road of like, this is all going to be revolutionary because blockchain, and they don't know anything about like how that is secure and what exactly decentralization is or immutability. And it's just, yeah, it leads people down these roads for a while. So yeah, let's I don't know how we're going to get people to wake up. I mean, if people want to listen to Calvin Iyer and CoinGeek and, Fake Toshi over there and all their little unicorns, I mean, be prepared to learn a costly lesson.
Dude, this is totally not going to get used to store encrypted kitty porn. I mean, the idea that you might want a small blockchain that you can validate, that it's really expensive to put fucking stupid data like this on, that's retarded, dude. Everything should be super fucking cheap. Like, we should be able to drop fucking petabytes of retarded nonsense onto a blockchain. There's absolutely nothing that can go wrong here when only a few giant data centers have copies of that. Nothing at all. There's no such thing as spam. There's no such thing as things not related to Bitcoin transactions that you don't want on a blockchain.
Yeah, this is a joke.
Stupidity is going to come home to roost, and it's going to be fucking hysterical. All right, Janine, what is going on with our favorite nemesis, the Federal Reserve?
Well, on February 28th, the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System published a document that claims to be making an amendment to their framework for market crash stress testing. For anyone who is not familiar with what those kinds of stress tests are, they're part of the Dodd-Frank supervisory. They're basically done in accordance with the Dodd-Frank Act. And in the document, they say that they are supervisory stress tests intended to provide company management, boards of directors, the public, and supervisors with forward-looking information to help gauge the potential effect of stressful conditions on the ability of these large banking organizations to absorb losses while meeting obligations to creditors and other counterparties and continuing to lend. Now, the reason that this document came up in terms of Bitcoin news is that under Section D, they say the following. Several commentators strongly supported the inclusion of salient market risks in the scenarios in general to make the supervisory stress test sufficiently dynamic. One commentator recommended that the board incorporate events that are not in the historical record in scenarios and that the board allow the list of variables included in the scenarios to change. Similarly, a commentator expressed support for the incorporation in the stress test of shocks, unlike those already experienced, since firms should be prepped to withstand events beyond those already endured. The commentator recommended that the board consider extraordinary shocks such as a war with North Korea, the collapse of the Bitcoin market, or major losses caused by trader misconduct in its scenarios. The current policy statement states that it may be appropriate to augment scenarios with salient risks as approaches that only look to past recessions or rely only on historical relationships between variables may not always capture current risks to the economic environment. So TLDR, basically they're saying that the Bitcoin market has become significantly influential, that it should be considered in terms of looking at what are the risks to the market. I assume they're mostly looking at the US market, global market as well, in terms of, what could cause a recession and the variables in that. So this doesn't really surprise me, because if you are the Federal Reserve and a section of the economy that you are claiming to oversee has put a significant amount of capital in a particular asset, whether that's Bitcoin or anything else, and that asset is projected, or the economy around the asset is projected to grow significantly in the future, then it would make sense to include that in any kind of economic projections and stress testing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is just a huge validation of Bitcoin as far as it growing and continuing to integrate into global markets. I mean, like the St. Louis branch of the Federal Reserve has always had like a very well-reasoned and grounded analysis of things overall in this space. And, I think this kind of shows that that attitude and their influence in the overall board of governors is really starting to shape how they as a whole view things. And I mean, the fact that this is even being considered or looked at is just showing like this is not a joke. This isn't a toy or a Ponzi scheme or a scam anymore. Like this is something that the Federal Reserve cannot ignore anymore in terms of the effects that it could have on global markets. Like it's just like there is no more dismissing this out of hand with nonsense FUDs and fallacies. Like even the central bank of the most powerful country in the world is acknowledging that publicly now.
Yeah, to say we've come a long way, it's like it sounds like a meager statement. I mean, like, geez, yeah, it's crazy to see them do this, but I mean, they are starting to take it seriously. I mean, we have seen these, this past year where institutional players have stepped in from universities and, hedge funds and all these different traditional guys come stepping into the space. And I saw, a recent tweet from, I think it was Pierre Richard, saying that, Bitcoin, I don't know which metric he was using to analyze this, but he was saying that there's more users in Bitcoin than there is in the New York Times. And, our subscribers to the New York Times. And then his next line was like, when will New York Times go mainstream? And I mean, I think, that's about right. I mean, if that does tie up correctly, it's like all these people that are like, well, we need this to go mainstream and that to go mainstream. It's like, no, this is going mainstream. Institutional players are already stepping in. And there's a reason why, the Fed is going to look into this as far as like a possible place that the market needs to stress test, because it's starting to become a place where people understand that it could be a hedge towards the traditional markets and our store value that whenever we're in this time of uncertainty as far as legalities and everything, it's just a tumultuous time, so it's a good place to be in Bitcoin.
Yeah, and the one thing I noticed, I don't know if either of you looked at the document, but I didn't see any reference to cryptocurrencies in general. Like they didn't say the cryptocurrency market, they specifically said Bitcoin. So that also seems significant to me because it shows that Bitcoin still is, not that market cap should really mean anything because it's very misleading, but Bitcoin is still the largest cryptocurrency by market cap. And so it would be interesting to see, this is mostly like it was a suggestion from a commentator to add it, but I wonder if at any point they would actually do an evaluation of like what cryptocurrencies are large enough or influential enough that they could also be included in this, or are they just going to be looking at Bitcoin because based on their projections, they think that's going to be the only one that's really going to affect the rest of the market if there are turbulences and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is perfectly in line with just reality. I mean, it is the one thing pretty much seeing pretty much unanimous adoption and integration by large legacy institutions, and it is unarguable that it is the driver of this market. Like if Bitcoin goes down, everything goes down 10 times as hard. When Bitcoin starts going up, that's when other things start being dragged up. Like it is the thing steering all of this space in terms of price and just market action. And I mean, the Federal Reserve is to a big degree a bunch of incompetent idiots, but even I don't think they're so incompetent that they can't recognize that.
Oh yeah, by far away. Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin's leading the pack on this, and I don't even. Yeah, it's kind of like if that changes, it's going to be real bad for the space because means like the experiment is ending, and but I mean we're past that experimental phase, and this is like just further evidence of that. People are taking this very seriously, and I looked through there, and I was because at first I had titled this thing like with cryptocurrencies in the title. I was like, oh no, it's just Bitcoin that they're talking about, and it makes sense that they would be doing that because it's a mile ahead of everything. 2 miles. All right, so going from there and talking about moving over to Japan and see what they've got to say about some market forces. So the Japanese National Police Agency has reported an increase in the amount of money laundering through cryptocurrency exchanges, but it still accounts for less than 2% of money laundering in the country. Since the second quarter of 2017, regulators have required information on suspected illicit activity, and since they started measuring, they recorded 669 cases in that second half of 2017. And now, in a statement on Thursday, the NPA says there were a reported 7,096 cases in 2018, which is more than a tenfold increase. And honestly, that sounds a little more alarmist. And in reality, I mean, since the first results were only half a year of record keeping, it's more like just a 5x increase, which that's still an increase for sure, but just not as bad. Now, the NPA says that say these cases get reported on suspicious activity, such as using multiple accounts with different bio data information, but using the same photo ID and using foreign IPs, even though details of the accounts show listing addresses in Japan. The NPA also says this rise in financial crime is more of a general trend across all sectors than just in crypto. They reported there were 417,000 cases of alleged money laundering in 2018, which would put the 7,096 crypto-related cases to 1.7% of total alleged money laundering. And to be honest, I'm starting to think these figures are coming out in order to make the case that Japan should work with the G20's Financial Action Task Force and implement their proposed plan to have KYC AML regulatory protocols in place for the third quarter of this year. Bitcoinist reports on how back in August of last year, the NPA invested more than $300,000 to develop tracking software for cryptocurrency transactions. All of this looks to be following the recent trend we've seen of countries picking which regulations best fit their governance model. Is it a surveillance state or free markets? And Japan's been a leader in Bitcoin for a long time, and they built self-regulatory bodies, and they've got a large amount of consumers and people using Bitcoin over there. But it does look like, just by the way, this NPA is reporting a 10x increase, when really, if you do the math, it's really just 5, and kind of alarmist numbers. And the mentioning of last year that they were trying to build out this develop this tracking software, and one of the G20 countries that's going to work with the Financial Action Task Force. So I mean, I'm kind of like it was one of those stories where I was reading it and I'm like, this is a Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general is a very small part of these, large groups of people that are moving money around in ways that they've been doing for years and years. Like, this is still it takes a little bit of technical competence. So it's not surprising that it's, under 2%, but it sounds like they're being a little alarmist about it. And yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about this?
I mean, it makes sense. If you're going to see a general trend in money laundering, you're going to see an increase in, money laundering through cryptocurrencies too. I mean, it's, really, it's just something in the long term that you're not going to really be able to stop. I mean, the more that things integrate with the legacy system, the more routes and strategies people can engage with to do this. And I mean, ultimately, if and when things go far enough to the point that Bitcoin is just used widely as a currency in and of itself, like, you will not be able to stop it. Like, you just won't. Like, you're not going to be able to go round up all the miners and tell them stop transferring these coins. Like, you're not going to be able to even tell over something like Lightning Network that you just received coins from somebody that are marked as illicit. Like, you just tumbling things through CoinJoin completely obscures what is illicit. Like, everything is going to wind up tainted to the point where, like, there's going to be no ability to actually do anything about this. Like, it's just an inevitable thing, and governments are going to scramble and try and avoid that until there's just nothing left they can do.
Yeah, it definitely is a general trend out there, and it's one of those things where when you start digging through the metrics of what's being used for what, it's very obvious that crime has been been used in the traditional sector for a long time, and sometimes we get a bad rap for money laundering and stuff, and that's the way they start to enact these regulations that are really just going to put a damper on those countries that are doing that or those regions that are doing that, and it'll be another one of those market learning things, but on a terribly large scale where a group of people are, well, it's just like an industry is kind of cut out from that region because they don't want to work within the regulations they set because it doesn't serve their customers. So,
But even then, you can't really cut a region out of the cryptocurrency ecosystem. All you can do is prevent it from integrating with the legacy system. Like, you can't stop me from sending bitcoins to somebody in some country. You can't stop everybody in your country who wants to accept bitcoin for things. Like, it's inevitable. It's unstoppable.
yeah, I mean, that's one of those things where, like you're saying, it might, I don't know how long it's going to take, but I'm sure that, they'll eventually see that this is something they can't censor. They can't really track and monitor the way that they'd like to. And I'm sure they're going to lose some investments in doing that, trying to figure out how to do it, and especially some time and business. So, that's where a lot of these favorable jurisdictions are really seeing a large uptick in people moving over there to set up shop so that they can actually build these things out and over time, because these jurisdictional borders may be set to geographic locations, but over time that's going to change. I mean, these don't have any borders. Like, we can transfer these bitcoins without your permission, and you can't really track them, and to try to bring it to a court of law, you're just going to waste your money even more. All right, so going from that to sticking to the theme here of trends in financial crimes and what else going on in this other, tangent sector. So CNBC reports on information out of the Fed that shows a surge in $100 bills over the past decade. The number of $100 notes in circulation since the financial crisis has gone from around 3 billion to over 12 billion, which is the most dramatic rise in particular denominations across the board. It's speculated that these are using hundreds as a store of value, albeit very clunky and hard to deal with. It's still the most private way to conduct business. And Nicholas Colas, co-founder of the Data Track Research, says, quote, "It has nothing to do with the U.S. economy and nothing to do with interest rates," close quote. While Deutsche Bank's Torsten Slock says, quote, "It could be driven by global fear of negative interest rates in Europe and Japan, or it could be a savings vehicle for U.S. households worried about another financial crisis, or it could be driven by more demand from the global underground economy," close quote. And going back to Colas again, he said in his statement, quote, "There's certainly enough evidence to say it is an enabler of corruption, but it is also a way for people to keep assets outside of the financial system, albeit in a kind of bulky way," close quote. And now the Federal Reserve of Chicago put out a research paper in 2018 that shows almost 80% of all $100 bills are now overseas, which could certainly be true with the large amount of bills we brought over to these Middle Eastern countries for protection and compensation during these long, drawn-out wars we've been involved in. And the Chicago Fed admits they are uncertain as to what is leading to the surge in these larger denominated notes, but others have speculated that it's being used for tax evasion, corruption, and financing terrorist organizations. It looks like there could be an upcoming battle to remove the 100 from circulation based on these speculations. Lawrence Summers, former Treasury Secretary and Director of the National Economic Council in the White House, has argued for abolishing $100 bills. Summers wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post in 2016 titled, quote, "It's time to kill the $100 bill," close quote. And Peter Sands wrote a Harvard research paper on the subject, said, quote, "By eliminating high denominations, high value notes, we would make life harder for those pursuing tax evasion, financial crime, and terrorist financing and corruption." So, close quote. Which that might certainly be true, but it's hard to not look at all of this discussion and not think about the currency wars in India, where they removed specific denominations under the same pretense. And it seems like these larger denomination notes would also really hurt middle income people who would then have to walk around with a bunch of 20s to handle their transactions in cash. I mean, just, it's very, very rare that someone like from my background would have $1,000 bill. It's just not that, 500, like what's the next highest note? I guess there's a $500 bill. I'm not sure really. 500 or 1,000, that's a lot quicker, a higher jump. And so you'd be relegated to the 20s. So yeah, it's hard to say how removing these notes would affect the economy, but this is interesting in comparison to these other stories where we're talking about as far as the Fed stress testing Bitcoin and, what exactly is going on with setting up all these KYC/AML regulations to stop this sort of activity in crypto. Whenever we're seeing like this has been a blatant case for the past decade with these $100 notes. And, like we've said in the past, a lot of times in these stories is that whenever they start saying that these, that our industry is being used for crime and all this malicious activity that we've said for a long time, that cash is the number one king in that sector. So yeah, what do you guys think about this, this surge in $100 bills and the discussion around it? I mean, does it sound like they're trying to get rid of these notes, or does it sound like they're just trying to figure out what's going on? Like, it seems like everybody's a little confused about it.
Yeah, I mean, like governments have wanted to phase out high value notes for a long time. I mean, like it started with like getting rid of the $1,000 note in the U.S. There's been a long trend in the history of cash where the highest value notes are discontinued and slowly moved out of circulation. Like even the EU began doing the same thing with the 500 euro note, in the very recent past. And as far as so much of the cash supply circulating internationally, like the dollar is one of the most stable fiat currencies out there. It's something that people want to get their hands on and hold, especially like when you're dealing with people who have a very unstable currency themselves. Like money circulates where there's demand for it. People want to hold the dollar because it's more stable. Like Americans go abroad and bring money to stimulate economies for a shit ton of different reasons. Like we are a country where a lot of people travel internationally and they bring their value with them and spend it there. Even go so far as to like illegitimate reasons for so many notes in circulation. Like you have countries like North Korea, like they print shit tons of fake $100 bills. Like they've done it for a long time. Like it's when you have a currency like the US that is the bedrock of the global financial system, there's going to be demand for it outside of the US. And I don't really think that is a big part of why they want to get rid of it. It's because governments want to slowly phase out cash. They want the ability to stop you from spending money if they don't want you to. They want the ability to track you. They want the ability to impose negative interest rates to expand the tool set that a central bank has to manage the economy. And like these things are just pretexts in an attempt to push things in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it looks like to me. I mean, we've talked about this, the way they're trying to implement negative interest rates in these currency wars, and, we've even covered it in other areas. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those notes that are one of those bills where, I could see it eventually being phased out just because it is one of those most useful notes. I mean, people carry around hundreds, because it's easier, and you're not having to carry around all this cash, and now that gets clunky and kind of hard to do, and I don't know, it's just harder to secure, puts you at risk. But yeah, for certain, I remember when these $100 bills were first released. Like when they were first released, they said that North Korea had already cloned them perfectly, and that they were just like counterfeits on the market the same day that there was these new bills on the market. And, since then, I hadn't seen that bill change. Like, I don't know how exactly they're saying, like, why it's that surprising. Because, yeah, it's like since they were released, I saw that this was a problem. Uh-oh, looks like we lost Shinobi. But I'm sure he's going to come right back to us. Janine?
Uh-oh.
Do you want to take us into the Stanford student to correct a professor?
Yeah, so on February 24th, a student at the University of Stanford named Connor Brown publicly shared an email on Twitter that he sent to the Stanford Graduate School of Business Advisory Council in order to report that he was dissatisfied with the portrayal of Bitcoin during a presentation by a guest lecturer by the name of Susan Athey. And Brown told Bitcoin Magazine that Athey was also slated to teach an entire course at Stanford next semester called Cryptocurrencies, and said that during the presentation that she gave at Stanford, she was claiming that Bitcoin was controlled by a small group of miners in China, that it wastes electricity by stealing from rivers to solve useless math problems, and also that it is secured economically and not cryptographically. Okay, well, and during her presentation, she also said that the better solution to a digital decentralized currency is Ripple with XRP. She specifically cited that Ripple was better because it has less exchange rate volatility. There is less trust issues with exchanges.
Less exchange rate volatility.
And the long transaction times are also drawbacks in Bitcoin. Let me see. She said that exchanges needed to buy Bitcoin to make I don't even know what that means. They need to buy Bitcoin to make transactions. I don't know what that means. So she basically said that Ripple XRP, especially the XRapid API and the overall consensus mechanism in Ripple, was faster, cheaper, and more secure and more environmentally friendly than Bitcoin. Brown continued that it concerns me that my classmates' first introduction to Bitcoin contains severe factual errors along with strong anti-Bitcoin rhetoric. The academy is not a place for marketing, but rigorously testing ideas. If a professor has a potential conflict of interest, they should be held to the highest standards of scrutiny and peer review. End quote. The worst part, as it turns out, although may not be surprising to anyone, is that she not only owns XR, she's an economist, not a technical person. She not only owns XRP, which she claims she acknowledged in the introduction of her presentation on Twitter, but she also has been a board of directors member of Ripple Labs since April 2014. And she claims that she also disclosed this during the introduction to the lecture. But yeah, the caliber of research is apparently appalling at Stanford, and this should be stopped. This is ridiculous. Like, how stupid are you people?
Oh my goodness, I feel bad for the kids that are paying in debt just to hear some sort of stupid presentation like that. And yeah, I cannot get over how many people say secure without understanding that. And they say it like they understand. It's like, oh, you're secure. You got a fence around you called blockchain. Like, you're good. Oh my God. Like, I'm so sick of that. Like, people wake up. But yeah, it's not too surprising, I guess, coming from a board of directors of Ripple and a Ripple stakeholder, a XRP stakeholder. And yeah, it's just terrible FUD points over and over again. I'm glad somebody stood up to correct them and sort of point out that it's just a blatant way to sort of FUD the whole system. And I mean, yeah, I totally am sentimental to that position of, like, scared that this is people's introduction to Bitcoin. I mean, that's like one of the reasons I started this meetup, was because the meetup that was here, it was like their introduction to Bitcoin was like, this is all about investing and making money, and that's it. And, you should invest with Bitcoin.com. You should invest with blockchain.info. It was so upsetting where I was like, you know what? Like, people need a different introduction to this stuff. And, that's what kind of got me all started up on it. I understand that. And yeah, it's just upsetting to hear that. And, if you need more evidence as to why you should be doing your own research on everything, even at these institutional levels, like, you might get the certification, but you haven't learned anything over there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a fucking joke. All right, so I guess last up is just a little op-ed from Bitcoin Magazine. And I do have to say, shame on you, Bitcoin Magazine, for publishing something written by Paul Pui. He is a complete piece of shit. He's the type of guy who tells you, hey, come move across the country to work for me developing this wallet. And when you get there, goes, oopsies, I'm sorry. A wallet is kind of a retarded thing to pay people for and has no business model. Sorry, I had you move halfway across the country, but no job for your family and your wife that you just fucking brought out here. But anyway, that aside, the whole op-ed is just a bunch of nonsense rhetoric about what is decentralization anyway. Like, nobody can agree on it, so we might as well just compromise and centralize some things and find a balance between centralization and decentralization. You do much arguing to moderation. It's a very, very obvious form of fallacy. So this article is pretty much a bunch of horseshit that completely ignores the actual core of what people mean when they say decentralization, what they want when they say decentralization. That is a core base layer network that is as decentralized, as censorship resistant, as open as possible. Because with that as a foundation, you can build anything on top. You can build something almost just as decentralized as that base layer on top of it. You can build something as completely centralized as you want on that base layer, but you cannot build something that is decentralized on something that is centralized. You cannot build something on top of something that is more decentralized than what it is built on top of. In a stack of layers, the bottom layer, the foundation, that levels degree of decentralization is as decentralized as you can make anything that you build on top of it. And it should absolutely, unconditionally be as decentralized as you can possibly make it. So, Paul Pui, you can go fuck yourself. You can shove this drivel rhetoric up your ass. No, we are not going to compromise that base layer because your compromise, air quotes, can happen on other layers, but it's not going to fucking affect that base one because that base one is the brick wall on the side of decentralization. You cannot go past that. And so that is going to stay where it is. That is going to be as far to that extreme as possible. And you can make your compromises on layers on top of that. And go fuck yourself, piece of shit.
Damn. Yeah. That was how you really feel. I'm just joking. Like, yeah, I get it, man. It's aggravating to see people bring this up and act like, this is just a reasonable compromise, especially in the name of mass adoption. Like we were just saying earlier. I mean, there's already large institutional players here, many different funds and products. And yeah, there's people that are, they're just building this out in a way to where, yeah, we've got a lot of users. And I mean, the mass adoption has already started. I mean, whenever we reach the level of hyper Bitcoinization and, where people are just using this as standard money, I mean, that's going to be another level of just like maybe people will finally put this argument to rest. But yeah, it's just it's like it's the large block, small blocks, 2x argument. It's like you're trying to take over that base layer. You got to understand people are going to get emotional about this. And like people are very, fervent about the way this goes. And I mean, like it is, it's kind of aggravating to see people talk about like, let's peel this word decentralization about it. Let's figure it all out whenever. Yeah. I mean, we see like DApps, DAOs, DAGs, DAX. I mean, like all these stupid things that say decentralized, but it's not. So, yeah. Hold up. What's going on?
Yeah, that's the thing, though. It's not emotional. It's a completely intellectual argument that people paint as emotional. And, like, to wrap this up, like, Paul is the emotional one trying to distort things. But let's move along into final thoughts so we can wrap this up and get on to the interview with Zaya. So while you're sorting that out, Rick, Janine, your final thought. Oopsies, wrong thing. Ding, 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 ding,
Yeah.
ding.
So yeah, some other, bad, negligent data disclosure decisions today. Facebook has decided to allow people to search for your Facebook profile using your phone number. Now, what was the original reason why people would have their phone numbers on their Facebook account? Oh, right, it was for 2FA. It was supposed to be a security mechanism. They weren't supposed to be shared. Of course, they do. They share it with advertisers, but they weren't supposed to be using the phone number as anything other than a security mechanism for the 2FA to be able to securely, control your Facebook account, if that's even possible. But now they have made it possible to search for people based on phone numbers. And it turns out, as maybe they've changed it because this happened on March 1st, but as of March 1st, when they initially added this, you were not able to disable it. You could only say who can look up using the phone number you provided. Everyone, friends of friends, or friends. You could not say no one. So Facebook, fuck off.
Woohoo! Pieces of shit. All right, Rick, you're up.
Yeah, just a cool tweet I saw out there. Another one of these, incredible space projects, except this one dealing with the rarest of Pepes, and the first rare Pepe through space. I just thought this was, real funny, and thought it'd be a funny thought to share that. And as always, go visit your local dubs.
Whee! All right. My final thought is just one more time. Go fuck yourself, Paul Pui. You are an absolute piece of shit. And everybody keep an eye out for the tweet, or you can check the YouTube channel for when it goes live. Give us 5 or 10 minutes and we will be right back on air with Zia from Iran. So see you guys in a couple minutes.
Later, everyone.
Bye.